Norway might be in the headlines because of the World Cup, but its most important ground is not a football pitch. It is a frozen island chain far north of mainland Europe, in a place many people could not point to on a map. Up there, Norway controls Svalbard, an Arctic doorway that Russia, Europe, the United States, and the future of shipping all have reasons to watch. By the end of this video, you'll know why this works and how to apply it with what you already have. Start with the map. Look at mainland Norway first, stretched along the North Atlantic and the Barents Sea. Then move north across the Arctic Circle. Keep going until the familiar shape of Europe starts to fade and the Arctic Ocean begins to take over. There sits Svalbard, remote and icebound, placed between mainland Norway, Russia, Greenland, and the wider Polar Sea. This is why the story matters. Svalbard is not just far away. It is closer to the center of the Arctic story than most people imagine. That location gives Norway reach far beyond its size. The research is clear on that point. Norway has extensive territorial claims in the Arctic region, tied to its Barents Sea coastline and its claims over the continental shelf. In 2014, Norway submitted an application to the United Nations for an extended continental shelf in the Arctic region. That was not a symbolic move. It showed how seriously Oslo sees the North, not as empty space, but as a zone of law, access, and future power. Svalbard matters for a simple reason. It sits in the right place. Not because it is large. Not because it has a huge population in the research. It matters because maps turn remote islands into choke points of attention. Nearby are Arctic sea routes, fishing grounds, research activity, and the edge of a northern ocean changing under pressure from warming temperatures. The Northern Sea Route runs along Russia's northern coast, but the research notes that it is also affected by Norway's territorial claims and control. That makes Norway part of a shipping story that many people assume belongs to Russia alone. And that shipping story is no longer theoretical. According to the Arctic Council, shipping traffic on the Northern Sea Route increased by 60% from 2019 to 2021. That does not mean the Arctic is now easy to cross. It does not mean ships can move without risk. It means interest is rising, and the numbers show it. A route that once looked like a frozen edge of the world is being watched as a future corridor. The mainstream view is that Arctic power is mostly about Russia and the United States. There is truth in that, because both draw heavy military and political attention. But that common picture misses something. Geography gives Norway a stronger hand than its size suggests. A quiet country of fjords, fisheries, and offshore energy also sits beside one of the world's most watched northern frontiers. If you only look at military size, you miss the map. If you look at the map, Norway becomes harder to ignore. The next layer of the story is what makes Svalbard unusual. Norway has sovereignty over the archipelago because of the Svalbard Treaty, signed in 1920. At the same time, that treaty allows citizens of other signatory countries access to Svalbard's resources. The user prompt puts it simply and accurately. Citizens and companies from other treaty countries have certain rights to live, work, mine, and conduct activity there under Norwegian law. That creates a rare arrangement. Norway controls the door, but it does not stand there alone. This is where the island chain becomes politically strange. Most people think sovereignty means one state controls a territory and everyone else stays out unless invited in. Svalbard does not work like that. Norway governs it. Norway sets the legal framework. Yet other countries have a treaty-based reason to be present. That is not a loophole. It is part of the system built in 1920. A place at the top of the world became shared in access, even while it stayed Norwegian in sovereignty. That helps explain why Russia has had a presence on Svalbard. The tension here should be handled carefully. The point is not that conflict is certain. The point is that geography and law have created a long-running contradiction. Norway is a NATO country. Svalbard is under Norwegian sovereignty. Yet Russian activity has long existed there, especially through settlements and mining history, as the research notes. That gives the archipelago an unusual feel. It is Norwegian land in the Arctic, with a legal structure that has allowed others, including Russia, to remain close. That contradiction matters more because the wider Arctic is changing. Climate change is accelerating, according to the research, and it is opening new opportunities for exploration and shipping while threatening a delicate ecosystem. This is not a story of a fully open polar ocean. It is not a story of easy control. It is a story of shifting access. As ice conditions change, the North becomes less isolated in strategic thinking. Places once treated as distant outposts begin to look like early positions on tomorrow's map. Resources are part of that shift. According to the United States Geological Survey, the Arctic holds about 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its undiscovered natural gas. Those figures help explain why governments and companies keep looking north. In Norway's case, energy is already a major part of national weight. According to the United States Energy Information Administration, Norway was producing around 1.7 million barrels of oil per day in January 2023, making it the largest oil producer in Western Europe. In 2020, the Norwegian parliament approved a new bill to allow exploration of oil and gas in Arctic waters. That ties Norway's Arctic role not just to maps and treaties, but to future energy choices. Fisheries matter too, and here the numbers are direct. According to the Norwegian Seafood Council, Norway's seafood exports reached about 107.1 billion Norwegian kroner, about 10.4 billion United States dollars, in 2022. That matters because the Arctic is not only about what lies under the seabed. It is also about what moves through the water and what lives in it. Fish, shipping, and energy all meet in the north, and each one brings a different kind of pressure. There is also a quieter layer to Arctic importance. Science. Research stations matter in the high north because the Arctic is one of the places where climate change can be tracked with unusual clarity. The research notes also point to northern Norway's polar night and midnight sun, features that make the region both a tourist draw and a place of research interest. In other words, the Arctic is not only a military map or a resource map. It is also a climate map. That broader picture carries debate. Environmental concerns have grown as oil drilling and shipping expand. The research notes protests and calls for sustainable practices. Another pressure comes from indigenous rights. The Sami people are indigenous to parts of northern Norway and have long depended on the region's ecosystem. That means Arctic policy is not just about states. It is also about people whose connection to the north is older than modern geopolitics. A common belief says the Arctic is empty, waiting for states and companies to divide it up. The evidence in the research pushes back on that. The Arctic is lived in, studied, fished, and argued over. It is not blank space. Security attention has risen as well. In 2023, the research notes increased military presence and joint exercises by NATO in the Arctic due to rising tension and competition for resources. Back in 2007, the Russian flag planted at the North Pole raised awareness of Arctic territorial claims among international stakeholders. Those moments do not prove that war is coming. They do show that symbols and military posture now carry more weight in the far north than many people once assumed. Norway's position inside this story is easy to underestimate. It looks like a small northern state known for mountains, offshore oil, seafood, and football. All of that is real. But the map adds another identity. Norway sits at the entrance to a region that could matter more for trade, energy, military planning, and climate science. That is why the quote from former Prime Minister Erna Solberg fits this moment. She said, "The Arctic has been an area of interest for Norway since the early 20th century, and we see its strategic importance growing as climate change continues to reshape our world." That line captures the deeper point. Norway did not suddenly become Arctic. It has been tied to the region for a long time. What changed is the world's level of attention. As shipping traffic rises, as energy questions sharpen, as military planners look north, and as climate science becomes harder to ignore, Svalbard stops looking like the edge of a map. It starts to look like a hinge. And that is the unsettling turn in this story. Not that Norway owns land in the Arctic. Not that an island chain is covered in ice. The unsettling part is that the next strategic map may depend on places that used to look empty. A remote archipelago can become a legal puzzle, a climate outpost, a shipping reference point, a symbol in great power rivalry, and a test of how states manage access in a changing ocean. So when Norway appears in a World Cup headline, remember that the bigger story is not only on the field. Far above the stadium lights and city streets, Norway controls Svalbard, a frozen doorway near one of the most watched regions on Earth. It does not give Norway total control of the Arctic. It does give Norway a rare role in a region becoming more central with each passing year. That is the power of geography. A quiet country can become a gatekeeper, not because it shouts the loudest, but because the map placed a door in its hands.